Sam LaPrade Show continues on City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
On January 29th, we will mark the 5th anniversary of the Quebec City Mosque shooting, when a white supremacist gunman walked into the mosque during evening prayers and killed 6 Muslim men while they were worshipping. The day will also be the first official National Day for Remembrance for the victims and the first National Day of Action against Islamophobia. The federal government announced its intention to officially designate that day just before the 4th anniversary of the attack, and it was made an official proclamation in April of 2021. We wanted to speak with Farid Khan today from Canadians United Against Hate. Hello, Farid.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. It certainly is a very tragic day to mark. Tell me how you're going to be doing that, Farid.
Well, unfortunately, we've had a hand grenade thrown into our plans to hold the vigil tomorrow because of this truck protest. We were just advised only a short while ago by City Hall that all the buildings around City Hall and the adjacent spaces will be locked down, which means that we can no longer hold a live event tomorrow. And so we're quickly trying to pivot to a virtual event. And once we hopefully get that set up, we will be sharing that widely on social media. So it's extremely disappointing that we can't gather together, not just members of the Muslim community, but also other Canadians who were interested in joining us. And while it is disappointing that we can't do anything in the national capital, we do know that there are events being held in cities across the country, in Quebec City, Montreal, Toronto, London, and other communities, both virtual events and in-person events.
Fred, walk us through what the plan was. We know it's changed now, but what was the plan for January 29th?
Well, the plan was to hold an interfaith candlelight vigil for tomorrow night, and to gather together people of different faith communities to speak on their reflections and share scriptures from their respective faiths, to call on Canadians to basically join not only in fighting Islamophobia, but the other forms of hate that we have seen rise. Islamophobia certainly has increased markedly since the shooting at the Quebec City Mosque. We've had another incident occur in September 2020 when a Muslim volunteer outside a mosque was killed by a neo-Nazi. And then last year we had the family in London that was mowed down by a white supremacist in a pickup truck. So, I mean, we're not only marking the event from 5 years ago, we're also calling attention to these other acts of hate that have happened targeting Muslims. And people should know that in the last 5 years, there have been more deaths of Muslims in hate-motivated attacks in Canada than in all G7 countries combined. So that's a sad testament to where Islamophobia and hate is in this country.
I had no idea that, Farid. That's shocking to me. It's very disappointing.
It is extremely disappointing. I mean, obviously there's hate in other countries. We obviously we see the most coming out of the U.S. because we're next door, but it's happening in other countries as well. But the fact that more Muslims have been killed in Canada in acts of hate than other G7 countries combined, I mean, that is something that people should take note of and use that as a rallying cry to say, enough, we're not going to have any more of this. We're marking this day today. Yesterday was the International Day for Holocaust Remembrance, and we have to remember our history, that it is little acts of hate that led to that. And I'm not saying that we are headed in that direction, but the fact is, why risk anything? Like, take the action needed, not just on a personal level among ordinary Canadians, but the government needs to take more decisive action. The fact that the official designation of the day took, more than 3 years after the Quebec City incident, is really disappointing, because the community started calling for the designation of that day later that year in 2017, and yet it took the government more than 3 years to declare what is essentially a symbolic act to say that no, we will not. We will remember the victims, and we will not have any of this Islamophobia. And there's no political capital to be lost in declaring a symbolic day, but it took 3 years, and that was very disappointing. I mean, we're happy that it happened, obviously, but it happened far later than it should have.
Tell me about Canadians United Against Hate. Walk me through the history of this organization.
Well, before the 2017 incident in Quebec City, I had been active through the Muslim community generally, but also in other ways, to call on politicians to take action against the rising hate we had seen over the last decade and a half. And I did not seem to be getting traction. And of course, I was engaging with other people online and in the community about tackling Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism, so forth. And I felt that there needed to be a formal organization. And I was connecting with people across the country who felt similarly, and therefore decided to set up Canadians United Against Hate. We have a team of people located in different provinces from Atlantic Canada to BC, and these are all people who are active in hate, and based on our membership count through our Facebook group, and through our Facebook group we have more than 5,000 supporters across the country, and we've got a following on Twitter as well. And the actions that we have taken have targeted all forms of hate, not just Islamophobia. We were active when the George Floyd murder happened, and then subsequently last year after the revelations of the Indigenous children's remains were found in the former residential school site. We've been active on anti-black racism, systemic racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, anti-trans messaging. So we are targeting all forms of hate, and the messaging that we use, and like sort of our motto, is that all that's needed for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. And so we're trying to encourage good men and women to stand up and say, no, we're not going to have this in our country, in our society, and we will stand against these forms of evil that are out there.
A little bit later on City News, or a little bit earlier, my apologies, on City News, I spoke with an I-man who was very much a part of what took place in Quebec City in 2017. He, shared words, of course, with the 6,000 people mourning after the horrific day. Let me ask you this, because, a part of the theme that he shared and you shared was about education. And it's one thing to educate adults. It's another thing to educate children. So it's a two-pronged question. What does the Muslim community say to their children? And what education do we need for all Canadians?
Well, I think the Muslim community tries to tell their children that this is not about everyone. Like, because this man was a white supremacist does not mean that all white people feel this way. They also try and teach their children, the teachings of Islam, which is acceptance of diversity, acceptance of people of other faiths, and that we live in a country where, diversity is a creed, and we have to work together to make sure that all the people of different backgrounds come together and help each other. I think you see this quite frequently in different ways on different occasions, and certainly during Ramadan there's a lot of interfaith engagement among people of different faiths and people of different backgrounds. But also, with respect to education, it's not only about public education of adults, which we need to have a public education campaign, a nationally led, government-funded national education campaign around fighting hate in Canada, but we also need schools across the country, and certainly at the high school level, to have mandatory curriculum that talks about the issues of racism and hate and the history, not just of things like the Holocaust, but the history that we've seen over our lifetimes. For example, what led to the Rwandan genocide, what led to the genocide in the Balkans. Right now, there's a genocide going on in China against the Uyghurs, and similarly against the Rohingya in Myanmar. And there's other moments in history that need to be taught, and what led to them, and why we not only need to be aware and educated about them, but also that we need to be aware of the signs that led to these sorts of things. And when those signs pop up, we need to not only be very vocal against them, but we need to stand up in person and call on our community leaders, our government leaders, to basically stand against what is essentially an evil in our society.
We have about a minute left. I want to ask you this question. It might be hard to answer in a minute. Do you still have hope that there's change?
Well, if I didn't have hope, I wouldn't continue to do what I do. So I would say, just in a single word, yes, I do have hope, because there are good people out there, of all faith backgrounds, of all ethnic identities, of racialized identities. There are good people out there who are trying to make this world and our society a better place, and we have to come together, all of us, and share our energies and commit ourselves to making the world as we want to see it. Canada and Canadian leaders often talk about the fact that we are a diverse society, diversity is our strength. But we need more than words. We need actions behind those words that makes sure that the type of elements that foment hate, including some of the elements that are arriving in Ottawa tomorrow with this truckers convoy, that they know that they are going to be challenged and they're going to be pushed back. Because if we don't do that, then we will become a mirror image of what we see in the U.S. and in some other places around the world.
I value your time very much, Furlead. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Furlead Khan, Canadians United Against Hate, speaking about the tragic incident that happened in 2017 on January 29th.